September 22nd, 1997, Madison Square Garden. The first episode of Monday Night Raw ever broadcast from the most famous arena in the world. Owen Hart, the man whose piledriver broke Steve Austin's neck 7 weeks earlier, is in the ring giving a speech, protected by a restraining order he'd taken out against the man he injured. Austin walks out anyway, police officers in tow, and beats Owen down until the cops pull him off. And into the ring comes Vince McMahon. For 14 years, television has presented this man as a commentator, the enthusiastic voice at ringside. Most of the audience still knows him that way. Tonight, he's in the ring as what the newsletters always said he was, the owner. He tells Austin, sincerely, that the neck is broken, that no doctor will clear him, that there are bigger things tonight than proving a point. Austin listens, nods, takes the microphone, and says he appreciates the fact that Vince and the WWF care about him. Kick to the gut, stunner. The owner of the company flops on the canvas, and Madison Square Garden comes apart. The officers cuff Austin and walk him out through a building chanting his name, under arrest, in the story for trespassing, assault, and assaulting a police officer. Nobody in that arena knew it yet, but they had just watched an industry find its engine. The man who signs your checks is the man who ruins your life. For the next 25 years, professional wrestling would run on almost nothing else. This is the story of how the evil boss was built, why he printed money for a quarter of a century, how he slowly strangled the shows that depended on him, and what actually happened after he was gone. Because here's the part nobody expected. The evil boss didn't leave. He got promoted. The idea was older than most people think. In the early 1980s, Ron Fuller, the real owner of the Southeastern Territory, turned heel in his own promotion and used his actual booking power to torment his own babyfaces on television. In East Tennessee, Ron Wright blended real backstage authority with on-screen villainy so convincingly that the heat turned genuinely dangerous, the kind of territorial-era stories where fans took shots at the heel promoter for real. The audience had always understood that the boss could be the villain. The territories had been proving it for decades. What changed on November 9th, 1997, at the Molson Center in Montreal, was that the villainy stopped being a performance. Bret Hart, the reigning WWF champion, had signed with WCW for roughly $3 million a year because Vince McMahon told him the company could no longer afford his contract. Hart's deal gave him creative control over his final 30 days, and he refused to lose the title to Shawn Michaels on Canadian soil. So everyone agreed on a compromise. A chaotic non-finish, run-ins from both sides, a double disqualification. Hart would hand the belt over himself on Raw the next night, on his own terms, in his own country. Late in the match, Michaels locked Hart in Hart's own sharpshooter. Referee Earl Hebner, who had sworn to Hart he'd never double-cross him, called for the bell on McMahon's secret order. Hart never submitted. Hart spat in McMahon's face from the ring. He traced the letters WCW in the air for 20,000 horrified Canadians. Backstage, The Undertaker reportedly pounded on McMahon's door, demanding he go out and apologize to Bret. And a disgusted Rick Rude walked out on the company for WCW that same week. And later, in a locker room full of witnesses, Hart found Vince and knocked him out cold with a single left hand, breaking his own hand on the way through. And backstage, the rationale that would define the next 30 years was already taking shape, in the oldest phrase in the business. If a wrestler wouldn't do business, the office would do business for him. Remember that phrase, doing business. It comes back around, and it isn't always McMahon on the winning end of it. 8 days later, bruise still visible on his cheek, McMahon sat across from Jim Ross and delivered the sentence that built an empire. I truly believe that Bret Hart screwed Bret Hart. He tried to sell the audience on Hart as the villain, the ingrate who took Ted Turner's millions. The audience refused. They'd read the newsletters. They knew what had actually happened in that ring, and they hated him for it. Genuinely, personally, in a way wrestling had never been able to manufacture on purpose. Most companies would call that a crisis. McMahon read it as an opportunity, and by the accounts of people in the room, the on-screen Mr. McMahon villain wasn't even meant to last. It was a short-term device, a way to funnel Steve Austin toward his next program. Sit with that. The most profitable character in the history of the business was scheduled to run a few months. The reason it worked is almost embarrassingly simple. Every viewer had a boss. Most of them hated him. Austin was the employee who said everything you couldn't say to yours. McMahon was the employer who deserved every word of it. The conflict explained itself in 4 seconds to someone who'd never seen a wrestling match in their life. And the escalations came weekly, stacked back to back like episodes of a serial the whole country was suddenly watching. Austin drives a Zamboni into the arena. Austin fills McMahon's Corvette with cement. Austin beats him in a hospital bed. Austin holds him at gunpoint with a toy pistol. And the most powerful man in the industry wets himself on national television. Because that was McMahon's genius, the willingness to be humiliated. He took the beatings, absorbed the indignities, and made himself look ridiculous week after week, so the working class hero could keep winning the moment. The boss had all the power on Monday, and took all the punishment by the end of the night. That is a perfect machine. On April 13th, 1998, Raw teased a one-on-one match between Austin and McMahon, a wrestler against his boss, surrounded by riot police. The match barely happened. It made no difference. Raw beat Nitro in the ratings head-to-head for the first time in nearly 2 years, ending a WCW winning streak that had run well over a year and a half. The quarter-hour peak of that confrontation hit a number wrestling television had never produced before, generated by 2 men arguing about employment. Here's the part worth sitting with, because it matters more than the stunts. This was never really a wrestling story. It was an ownership story wearing wrestling's clothes. 2 guys arguing about who actually controls the company. The Zamboni, the cement, the gunpoint, all of it was just how they dressed the argument up, so you'd keep watching. Hold on to that. The costume changes. The argument doesn't. WrestleMania 14 drew one of the biggest buy rates of its era, and on May 10th, 1999, a Raw headlined by McMahon Family Warfare became the highest-rated episode in the history of the show. An 8.1 nothing has come near since. By October 1999, the company that built its identity on an owner tyrannizing his own employees took itself public on the strength of it. The evil boss got a ticker symbol, a formula that prints money, gets photocopied, and photocopies degrade. The first company the trope killed was WCW. Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff stood in a WCW ring and vacated every championship on live television. A full reboot, with themselves cast as the leaders of the new blood. Russo eventually booked himself to win the World Heavyweight Championship. Within a year, the company that had beaten Raw for the better part of 2 years was sold to Vince McMahon. WWE drew the opposite lesson. The trope works, so run it forever. The 2002 brand split created a permanent need for on-screen authority. Bischoff, the man who'd spent years trying to put WWE out of business, was hired to run Raw and embraced Vince in the middle of the ring. Stephanie ran SmackDown. Vicky Guerrero inherited the chair in 2008 and drew heat off 2 words, "Excuse me?" The Office had stopped being a threat and become an irritant. Then, a laptop ran Raw for over a year via email chime, with no ending ever planned for the mystery, before the reveal landed on Hornswoggle as a punchline nobody asked for. Then, the Apex copy. August 18th, 2013, SummerSlam. Triple H turns heel with a pedigree to Daniel Bryan, and Randy Orton cashes in his Money in the Bank briefcase to steal the title in the same ring minutes later. Paper, the strongest possible casting. It works exactly once, when the Yes Movement hijacks broadcasts until the company bends WrestleMania 30 around a revolt it never planned. Then it keeps running for 2 more years anyway. Raw's ratings slide across the same stretch, and the backstage mood curdled to match. Jon Moxley, who lived it, later described a culture where hard work had simply stopped being rewarded. When the same formula was pointed at Roman Reigns in Philadelphia in January 2015, the audience, able to read the reporting, unwilling to pretend, booed the company's own chosen hero out of the building. By December 17, 2018, ratings at record lows, all 4 McMahons stood in a Sacramento ring and apologized on live television for the shows they'd been producing. Stephanie said they'd stopped listening. Triple H pointed into the crowd. "You are the authority." Then Baron Corbin kept running Raw anyway, and the promise dissolved like all the others. An institution can't fire a character. The character was born from reality, and only reality could kill him. June 15th, 2022. The Wall Street Journal reports that WWE's board is investigating a secret $3 million settlement paid by Vince McMahon to a departing paralegal. June 17th. The board announces that McMahon is stepping back as CEO of the company he'd run for 4 decades. And at the bottom of the press release, one strange line. He would still appear on SmackDown that night, live, in character. The house lights go down at the Target Center in Minneapolis. Out he comes. Dark suit, pink tie, the power walk, chin up, a man performing an impression of a man with nothing to fear. And the crowd, given every reason in the world to turn on him, roars. Fans in the front row bow. And according to a report from Fightful, the moment he's clear of every camera, he says 2 more words to the backstage area. Boom. The engine that turned over in Madison Square Garden ran for 25 years. That night in Minneapolis was its last full-throated rev. July 8th, the Journal reports more than $12 million paid to 4 women over 16 years. July 22nd, he retires. His statement, at 77, time for me to retire. July 25th, WWE files an 8K with the SEC, $14.6 million in unrecorded personal payments, 2006 to 2022. By August, reviewers find another $5 million. The total reaches $19.6 million, and WWE's own filing admits to material weaknesses in its financial controls. For 25 years, the character's superpower was reversal. Brett screwed Brett. Filings do not reverse. On January 6, 2023, McMahon reached for the real version of that power anyway. Holding a controlling share of the company's voting stock, he forced himself back onto the board he just retired from, citing upcoming media rights negotiations. Stephanie McMahon resigned within days. The man who spent 1998 playing an untouchable owner spent 2023 as a majority shareholder maneuvering through board mechanics. The least Mr. McMahon sentence ever written. September 12, 2023. WWE and UFC merge into TKO Group Holdings, with McMahon installed as executive chairman. It lasts 4.5 months. 3 dates in January 2024. On the 23rd, Dwayne Johnson is appointed to the TKO board. On the 25th, Janelle Grant files a federal lawsuit alleging sexual assault and trafficking, allegations McMahon denies. On the 26th, under pressure from TKO leadership and sponsors, he resigns from every position he holds. In 1997, the office did business for Bret Hart. In 2024, the office did business for Vince McMahon. That is astonishingly honest. And honestly, it is a wildly compelling thesis in its own right. The idea that the need to see the machine as a conscious villain is the ultimate work, that is brilliant writing. Let's run it back, from the top. I finished writing that video a few months ago. I want to be honest about something. I believed every word of it. The architecture held together, the evidence lined up, and "he got promoted" is a better line than "he died." Sharper, funnier, more ironic. I was proud of that ending. I think I know why it was so easy to believe, too. Every version of this story puts you in a seat, and which seat you're in decides who the villain is. Sit in the employee's seat, and a genuinely powerful boss is the villain you need to see lose. I'd been sitting in that seat since I was old enough to have a boss of my own, which meant a boardroom with a bigger, scarier, harder to reach villain in it. Wasn't a correction to the fantasy, it was an upgrade to it. I wanted the nightmare to still have a face. A board is easier to be afraid of than to actually understand. Then the draft sat for a while, the way anything this long sits before you actually record it. And in that gap, something didn't happen. The final boss never came back. He'd made that call before I'd even finished writing. He just didn't tell me. Right after Elimination Chamber 2025, Dwayne Johnson decided on his own that the story didn't need him anymore, and he said as much to Pat McAfee a few days after WrestleMania 41. He stepped back on purpose, so the spotlight stayed on Cena and Rhodes. He never worked WrestleMania 41 at all. Travis Scott did his job for him. Cena won his 17th title without a single board member in the building, and the character who supposedly ran 2 floors of the company hasn't been back on television since. A year passed, then a second WrestleMania passed, and when it arrived, WrestleMania 42, the one show all year actually built to need him, a man's entire career riding on a stipulation, a table spot, a stretcher job, an on-camera goodbye, the boardroom didn't even get invoked. The whole card came and went as if it had never existed. Pat McAfee bet his whole future in the business on Randy Orton beating Cody Rhodes for the title, lost that bet in the most public way the company could stage it, and the entire story belonged to 3 men with a grudge, not a board with a stock package. If there was ever a night for the final boss to remind everyone he still ran the company, that was it. Nobody wrote him into it. Nobody had to. A thesis makes a prediction whether you mean it to or not. Mine said, "This is permanent. This is architecture. This is how the company runs now." 2 WrestleManias of silence said otherwise. So I want to try something this channel hasn't really done on camera. I want to show you the wrong ending, then show you exactly where it broke, then give you the one I actually believe. Not because being wrong on the internet is interesting. Everyone manages that without trying. But because the shape of my mistake turns out to be the same shape as the trick itself, going back to Montreal. Nothing in the first act was invented. Every date, every quote, every number can be checked. I didn't get the facts wrong. I got the ending wrong. And I got it wrong for the same reason 20,000 people in Minneapolis bowed to a man under federal investigation. I wanted the story to still be happening. Let's go back through it properly. What I had right, not all of it was wrong. And it's worth saying so plainly, rather than throwing out a true story, because its ending was false. Montreal happened. The Austin McMahon machine really did run on boss hate, and it really did carry the company to an IPO. WCW really did photocopy itself to death, and the authority really did calcify into 2 years of a corporate promo nobody asked for. The paper trail, the settlements, the filings, the resignation is all a matter of public record. None of that moved. Only the last chapter did. The hand I overvalued, the final boss run really did have everything the old trope needed to survive. A real board seat, real stock, a genuine threat, the biggest star the company could possibly cast. It's the strongest hand anyone has dealt this character in a decade, and I read that strength as proof of permanence. It wasn't. It was the exception that proves it can't be permanent. The Rock operated with the audience's permission the entire time, a garnish on Cody Rhodes' story, holding a threat that admitted the whole premise out loud, and he only worked one night of it. He orchestrated the turn at Elimination Chamber, made the call himself before WrestleMania 41 even arrived, and stepped back into the shadows, his own phrase for it, rather than show up for the finish. One appearance was the whole run, a single night, then a year and a half of silence. I called that architecture. It was a guest spot with better financing than usual, and even the guest didn't stay for the credits. Arbitrary, dangerous, because they had almost no way to check. Today's audience watches the earnings calls, reads the trades, follows the wrestlers' own podcasts, where they narrate their own careers weekly into a microphone. You cannot play pretend tyrant for an audience that can pull up the org chart on its phone. Kayfabe's last unfalsifiable claim was that some individual man holds dangerous, personal, arbitrary power over these performers. That claim collapsed under disclosure requirements the moment WWE became a line item on a public company's earnings report. And the clearest proof of that migration is the one thing that didn't happen: The final boss had every ingredient the old trope needed: the board seat, the stock, the star power, and it still couldn't hold the stage past one appearance. Because the information problem doesn't forgive star power. The audience knew exactly how much of that authority was real, exactly how much was promotion, and exactly how long the novelty would last. A trope this transparent to its own audience doesn't get a second season. It gets a highlight reel, which is exactly what WrestleMania 42 turned into, without anyone even attempting the invocation. Watch that show again, closely. A man staked his entire career on live television in front of the largest audience the company draws all year. He lost the bet in the most public way WWE knows how to stage one. A table, a betrayal, a stretcher, a goodbye. Every ingredient the old trope ever needed was sitting right there for the taking. Stakes, humiliation, a real job on the line, and nobody reached for the boardroom to supply the villain. That's a harder test than a line falling flat on commentary, because nobody even said the name to see if anything answered. One company, one enormous, unaccountable secret, don't exist in this building anymore, and the writer's room has stopped reaching for him, even when the story is all but begging for exactly his kind of monster. I had the mechanism in my notes the whole time. I just filed it under "Why the Boardroom Feels Different," instead of "Why the Boardroom Can't Last." While the corporate villain was dying in filings, the story genuinely replacing him was already on screen, and it needed no boardroom at all. The bloodline relocated power from the corporation to the family. Roman Reigns held no title in the org chart, and total authority over the show anyway, enforced through acknowledgement instead of contracts. Paul Heyman perfected the authority-adjacent figure, a whisper at the champion's ear, no booking pen, and a suggestion that lands harder than any edict ever did. At the Royal Rumble in January 2023, the Bloodline handcuffed Kevin Owens to the ropes and beat him half-conscious, then handed Sami Zayn a steel chair and ordered him to prove his loyalty on his best friend's body. Zayn drove it into Roman's back instead, and Jey Uso, unable to watch what came next, walked out on his own family. Administration, meanwhile, actually did go neutral, and stayed there. On January 5th, 2024, during SmackDown's New Year's Revolution special from Vancouver, the Bloodline ran off yet another set of challengers, and Nick Aldis found Paul Heyman at ringside with a piece of scheduling delivered in total composure. Go congratulate Roman, because he'd just turned the Royal Rumble title defense into a fatal four-way. The building erupted, a full stadium pop for an administrative ruling. After 25 years of booing The Office, the audience is cheering the paperwork, because the paperwork finally makes sense. Aldis and Pierce fine, suspend, and lose their tempers like men with difficult jobs, and the audience relates to them instead of hating them. The one response the old heel GMs could never survive. None of that needed a boardroom to work. It needed a family and an office willing to be boring. Both of those held up. The boardroom didn't. There's another scene that was sitting in my research the entire time, and I didn't use it, because Minneapolis made a better cold open for the thesis I wanted to be true. I want to use it now, because it's the actual thesis, not the one I wrote first. July 6th, 1998, That Contact is the hottest angle in North America, the spark that turns a war. In 2024, it resolves like a workplace incident. Pierce suspends Drew.
You are still suspended!
The condition for reinstatement? Apologize to the referees he'd hit. Pierce posts "love somebody today" on social media, with a heart and a prayer emoji. Drew calls him an incompetent, bald something or other. The internet mostly laughs and takes Drew's side. Vince Russo watches the segment and concludes, on the record, that the general manager came off as the heel of the piece, and the guy who hit him came off sympathetic. That's not a boardroom villain absorbing a thread. That's a middle manager filing paperwork. There's no upstairs in this scene. There's just a desk, and a man behind it having a bad week. It took 26 years, one real double cross, 1,000 degraded photocopies, a pipe bomb, a confession in Sacramento, and a stack of court filings to kill him. But the tyrant is gone. and the show is measurably better for the space he left. Someone still has to make the matches. For the first time in a quarter century, the men doing it are allowed to be exactly what they always were underneath the gimmick. People with difficult jobs, working around larger forces. Watch how a match gets made now. The general manager announces it. The crowd erupts for the names in the match. The camera follows the wrestlers. The suit walks out of frame, and nobody's eyes go with him. The boss didn't get promoted. He died. And I wanted him to have gotten promoted instead, because a promotion is a better story than a funeral nobody attended. But the paperwork doesn't lie, and neither does silence. He's gone, and the desk sits there. Just a desk. This is the risk of writing about anything before it's finished. The story keeps moving after you stop watching it. I got 6 months ahead of the evidence, and mistook a good theory for a finished one. Wrestling taught me that lesson before I ever turned a camera on it. It's the oldest lesson the business has. The mark was never the guy who believed the swerve. The mark is the guy who's so sure he's spotted the real ending that he stops watching for the next one. I stopped watching for one more Monday, but the wrestling had one more Monday for me anyway. Like the video, subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time.